Good evening, everyone. How are we doing here tonight? Good. Thank you for coming out here on this August evening, which is probably the best weather we've had in several weeks. So thank you for paying us a visit. My name is Mallory Ahrens. I'm the Associate Director of Programs and Services here at Darien Library. It's my great honor to welcome you to our community room this evening. I wanted to begin by saying this event would not be possible without the work of many. The first group I wanted to thank is the Friends of Darien Library. They, through all of their donations, programs like this are able to come to the community free of charge, including all of our wine and cheese and that goodies. So thank you to the Friends of Darien Library. And of course, to our good friends at Barrett Bookstore, our kind of comrades in literature here in this town. Thank you for being here and selling books. Please buy one on your way out. I know I would appreciate it. Barrett's would appreciate it. Mary Hogan will certainly appreciate it. It's a great read. And in addition to that, we also co-sponsored this event with Darien Senior Programs. You'll get to hear from our resident expert in just a bit, as well as At Home in Darien. I wanted to then pass over the mic to Gina Blum, the Executive Director of At Home, who's going to tell you a little bit more about the organization and a little bit more of our presenters this evening. Welcome, Gina.
Thank you, everybody. At Home in Darien is a nonprofit organization here in town, and our mission is to help seniors retain their independence and remain living at home safely as long as they can as they age in order to make Darien a more livable community. In order to do this, we provide some important services, and one of them is transportation. So we give rides to people Monday through Friday, 9 to 4, wherever they need to go. We're also really excited this year to have a new program, which is a half-price taxi voucher program. So any senior or disabled person in town can purchase taxi vouchers that allow for a more affordable taxi ride on demand. So whenever someone needs to go somewhere, weekends, nights, holidays, or anytime. So we're excited about that. We also have volunteer services. So we have a wonderful core of volunteers who help people with grocery shopping. They do home visits. They do check-in calls. They do small chores around the house, whatever might need to be done. We also have a whole big squad of kids from the high school who do some seasonal work, like raking of leaves and shoveling of snow off public sidewalks. So it's a wonderful program. We have home safety evaluations to make sure that your homes are safe and keep everybody up to date on whatever needs to be modified in the home. We do referrals to vetted service providers, so if you need things done around the house and need to hire somebody, it gives you some peace of mind as to the person that you're allowing into the home to do some work. We have these great membership cards, which offer great discounts to local businesses, and we're just hoping to keep people connected to the community. We also are really proud of our communication. So we have a newsletter that goes to every mailbox in Darien 3 times a year. We do a monthly calendar of community events so that people stay connected and take advantage of all the great things going on around town. And we do a monthly blog as well. We're also a resource service for advice, for support, for seniors, for their loved ones, so that they know about, and we can refer them to assistance in the community, whatever they might need. So if you have any questions after the program, feel free to talk to me or grab a brochure that's outside on the table. But it is my great pleasure tonight to be here to introduce our wonderful our program. So I'm first going to introduce Beth Paris, who is an At Home in Darien board member. Beth has worked for the town of Darien since 2009 and is currently the department head and director of Darien Senior Programs at the Mather Center. She's been working in the field of aging for over 35 years, specializing in dementia and community-based services. She serves as a caregiver support group leader and a presenter of the caregiver training course for the Southwest Connecticut Alzheimer's Association. She earned a BS in gerontology and mental health from the University of Bridgeport. Beth is joined this evening by Mary Hogan, who is the best-selling author of 2 Sisters and the historical novel The Woman in the Photo. Previous novels include the young adult titles The Serious Kiss, The Perfect Girl, and Pretty Face. Mary lives in New York City with her husband, actor Robert Hogan, and their Catahoula leopard rescue dog, Lucy. Did I pronounce that right, the kind of dog? You can find out more at maryhogan.com. So without further ado, Mary and Beth.
I'm not surprised to see so many people know somebody with Alzheimer's or another dementia, because in our country today, someone develops Alzheimer's every 65 seconds. That's every minute of every day. And many dementias go undiagnosed, often for years, until a loved one nags and cries and whines and threatens divorce. And this is why I wanted to show you my book, because that brings me to my novel, Left. Left is a love story with a twist, inspired by my own somewhat twisted love story. It's about a woman who creates a fantasy life to cope with her husband's descent into dementia. In 2013, my husband of now 35 years, he was diagnosed with a vascular form of dementia caused by a series of small strokes. And even though his formal diagnosis was in 2013, I had seen signs of trouble for a full 2 years before that, which is not at all uncommon. That 2-year period really taught me a lot, not just my own experience with my husband, but, excuse me, but my research. I saw the real perils of ignoring or denying the symptoms of early dementia. And I knew that that's what I wanted to write about. I didn't want to write something that you had already read, like a Still Alice or a book about Alzheimer's. I wanted to say something new. So in my novel, Left, what I ended up doing was creating sort of a hybrid between a memoir and a novel, meaning I told the absolute truth about some things that have happened in my marriage with my husband and myself. And then I invented a storyline of something that could happen, and then I ended it with the way that I envision our lives to be a little ways down the road. I think at its core, this book is about a marriage as much as it is about a disease. It's about a marriage that goes through something big, which most marriages do, but it's a love story with a twist. In my personal life, my husband, Bob, he was an actor. He used to be an actor. I think the fact that he was an actor, that might explain why memory problems were not his first signs of cognitive disease. I think after years of memorizing lines, his memory muscle was really well developed. The best way I can describe my husband's earliest signs of trouble is to say that my caring and considerate man became sort of an ass. I hate to say a bad word, but that's true. It seemed to happen overnight. We would have a date to meet at a restaurant in New York where we live, and he would leave me sitting there for half an hour with no explanation. He didn't get lost. He didn't forget the time. He just dilly-dallied on his way over. He talked to people on the block. He just didn't put two and two together that I was sitting there waiting for him. Or we would have a conversation and he would nod and act like he was listening, and then a couple minutes later he would say something that showed me he hadn't been listening at all. It was very confusing at the beginning. I thought, what is going on? He just was not himself. I felt like my husband had been abducted by an alien. And for some reason, early on, all of our issues revolved around housework. And probably because I used to brag. Bob and I have the perfect division of labor around the house. I cook, he does the dishes, I do the laundry, he vacuums up the dog hair. I was very satisfied with the way we divided the jobs around the house. I felt very valued. But all of a sudden, after dinner, Bob would get up, he'd walk over to the TV, pick up the remote control, and he would plop down. And I'd say, hey, Bob, what about the dishes? And he'd say, oh, yeah, I'll get to it. And then he never would. Or I'd say, Bob, the garbage smells a little stinky. And he'd say, oh, yeah, I'll empty it. And he never would. This happened week after week, month after month. I found myself becoming a person that I hate, which is a nag. Oi. So I should add here that Bob is 20 years older than I am. His first symptoms appeared when he was in his 70s and I was in my 50s. So I suspected cognitive disease fairly quickly. And I told him, I said, Bob, something's wrong. You need to get tested. And he said, Mary, something's wrong with you. You need to get tested. See, I told you, an ASS. Thank you. Thank you, Dad. It was a very upsetting, frustrating time, and I have to say, quite honestly, I did not keep it to myself. I told people, I told Bob's grown kids, something's wrong with your dad. He needs to get tested. I told his best friend, I told my best friend. I told Bob's primary care physician, something's wrong. I'm his wife, I know. Everybody said exactly the same thing to me. They all said, he seems fine to me. Right. Every caretaker hears that over and over. He seems fine to me. Now, to be fair, when they would ask me, well, how do you know? I mean, what are you basing this on? I'd say, well, you know, after dinner, he gets up and he goes and watches TV. He doesn't listen to me. He doesn't empty the garbage. And they just sort of looked at me like, well, he's a guy, isn't he? I mean, what are you talking about? So I felt like I was noticing 1,000 little things. I was his wife. I knew something was wrong, but I could not get anybody to listen to me for a long, long time. Until something big happened, a real earthquake in our marriage. And I'm not going to tell you exactly what happened because you can read about it in Left. I wrote the exact story of what happened to us in this book. But I will say this. We were on vacation in a foreign country, and it was the last day of our trip. We were on our way to the airport, and Bob was driving the rental car, and my menopausal bladder began to act up the way it always does when a bathroom is really, really inconvenient. Excuse me to the men in the audience, this is too much information, but it's the truth. I had to go urgently. So Bob pulled off the highway, and he pulled over at the first cafe that he saw. And I ran in, I used the bathroom, I ran out, and he was gone. The car was gone. My purse that I had left on the seat of the car was gone. And in that purse was my phone, my money, my passport, my plane ticket, my everything. I didn't even have a Kleenex. And I'll show you, I do not go anywhere without a Kleenex. And I didn't have anything.
Me one too.
Right. So I did what you would do. I did what anybody would do. I stood there and I waited for him to come back. And he never did. He never came back. He left me there, which is not why I have called this novel Left, although I could have, because that was really a turning point in our lives. My husband's decision-making that day, that awful day, his judgments really cemented for me that something was horribly, horribly wrong. So when we got home from that trip, I nagged and cried and whined and threatened divorce until finally he agreed to get tested. And that test changed our lives. For better and for worse. For better because I finally knew what was wrong. And for worse because I finally knew what was wrong. Now, does anybody know what is entailed in what you go through to be tested for dementia? It's not a one-shot thing. In fact, Beth will probably talk about this a little bit. But with Bob, he had a brain MRI and a very long neurological exam, a neurological assessment that was about 3 hours long. I know that some doctors will ask you to get a PET scan, which is a little bit more clear, but with Bob, you could see all the areas in his brain where his strokes had killed parts of his brain. And that test led to the diagnosis of vascular cognitive impairment. He was still in a mild phase back then, which meant that he could function with support. But it really, as I said, it changed our lives. Now, my husband, his reaction to his diagnosis was denial. Denial. He hated the word dementia, first of all, as everybody that I know who has dementia hates that word. To Bob, for some reason, it means demented. It means you're so far gone, there's no help. Early on, when he would talk about his diagnosis, which he rarely did, he would joke that he had Alzheimer's light. He would make light of it. And that was how he coped. But I knew that I had to educate myself, that I couldn't deny it. So I live in New York City, Bob and I live in New York, and I went to a lecture called Understanding Dementia. It was like Dementia 101. And it was for family members, caretakers. It was not for the patients themselves. And I will never forget that day. It was a big room like this and full of people who were all slightly panicked. And the woman got up to the microphone, and the first thing she said is, "Let's be clear. Alzheimer's and other dementias are progressive, incurable, and fatal. They will eventually render your loved one unable to talk, walk, eat, bathe, or do anything without 24/7 nursing care." And it went downhill from there. This lecture was intended to be kind of like a tell it like it is, rip the Band-Aid off kind of a thing. But I walked out of there feeling terrified. To me, it felt more like, I don't know if anybody's ever had their legs waxed for the first time. That was more like the ripping. I was so scared after that because my biggest fear really was I was afraid I would fail my husband, that I didn't have the right stuff. And I knew what was coming, and my fear was that when the going got tough, this girl would want to get going. I could tell you quite honestly, 7 years in now, 7 years after first symptoms, I have wanted to run away from home many times. And I did once, but I came home. All that matters, a support group I joined early on taught me 2 valuable lessons. Number 1, they said, never judge a caretaker, not even yourself, especially not yourself. They're all doing the best they can. And the second thing they said was, they told me, you're stronger than you think you are. And that has proven to be true. So if anybody here is just going through this, I want you to take it from me. You are stronger than you think you are. My second big fear, though, after that eye-opening lecture was financial. They laid out the incredible cost of Alzheimer's and other dementias. In my neighborhood where Bob and I live in New York, a memory home near us is $17,000 a month. And that's just the base price. I was shocked to find out that when a person is at the very end of their Alzheimer's or their dementia and really need around-the-clock watching, a $17,000 a month home will require you to hire your own caretaker to come in. It's extremely expensive. Memory care is not covered by Medicare, and it is not covered sufficiently by long-term care insurance. I can tell you I've been talking about this since June, and I have only met one person who's happy with their long-term care insurance, and I was shocked. And she actually is happy with it because her husband was using it before his dementia started, so it was sort of an easy thing. I think that it's been my experience, there are a lot of loopholes in these policies that favor the company. And in my novel, I kind of wove in some of the realities of long-term care insurance because I felt that a lot of people don't know. They don't know until they're trying to get into it, what really is entailed. Nonetheless, the cost of Alzheimer's and other dementias is the elephant in our country's living room. The Alzheimer's Association will say the silver tsunami is coming, and that means that baby boomers like me are all aging into dementia, and it's going to be a real dire situation that we're all in denial about. But let's skip that and get back to my marriage. I can tell you today, 5 years after formal diagnosis, 7 years after first signs, things are both better and worse. Better because, believe it or not, I feel less afraid. I feel more competent. I feel like I can handle what's coming. Worse because Bob is worse. He definitely has memory problems now. His short-term memory is completely shot. He asks questions over and over, most commonly, where are you going, when are you coming home? But memory problems are the least bothersome challenges that we face today. I was surprised to find out really what the challenges would be. And today we face 3 challenges that I hadn't expected. Number 1, when your brain goes haywire, your body does too. I should have known that, of course. My husband's body is forgetting how to walk. His brain is forgetting how to walk. He has a lot of problems with his gait. And the way it was explained to me is that when we learn to walk, it's a complicated system of sort of rolling like this. And when you start to forget that, you begin to shuffle. And I think people might have seen the typical Alzheimer's shuffle when you see people walking like that. Excuse me. Bob does not have that yet, but he has a lot of trouble picking up his feet. And that means he trips on everything. That means he falls a lot. His specialty is tumbling over when he's walking our dog in the park. Now you may wonder, why is he walking the dog if he can't walk? But our neurologist, and I'm quite sure every neurologist will tell you that when it comes to dementias or Alzheimer's, it's a use it or lose it situation. You have to do absolutely everything you can do for as long as you can do it, or you will lose it much more quickly. So I can say Bob would prefer not to walk the dog, but I make him. I walk her every day, he walks her every night, and it keeps him moving. But again, forgive me for being indelicate, but New York City has a pooper scooper law. So I'll tell you that if Bob is not holding onto a cane or a railing, when he bends over to bag our dog's business, he will tumble over. He will lose his balance and tumble over. He has not fallen on a poop yet, which we're very grateful for, but I'm sure it's a matter of time. That symptom of his disease in this stage is what bothers him the most. He feels disabled, not being able to walk, particularly in a walking city like New York. It really, really bothers him. He talks about feeling like he's falling forward when he's walking. And it upsets him more than anything. It is not the symptom that upsets me more than anything. That is something that's more on the emotional side. At this stage, my husband's brain no longer recognizes how his behavior affects other people. He's become noticeably self-centric, which is saying a lot for an actor, I know, but I'll give you an example of something that happened a couple days ago. We're doing some construction in our apartment, and the contractor dropped off some of his equipment, some of his tools and materials the day before the job was to start. He left them in a corner of our apartment in these black contractor bags. And that night, while I was asleep, my husband decided that for the first time in 7 years, without being nagged, he decided to empty the garbage. So he took those black contractor bags, he took them out to the curb, and at 6 a.m. the next morning, the garbage men picked them up and threw them out. So when the contractor got there, he said, "Where's my stuff?" Now, I'm not an expert on what normal people do, but I think in this situation, the appropriate response is, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry. What was in there? I'm running to the hardware store. Let me take care of this. I'm so, so sorry." Bob just kind of said, "Oh, sorry." He shrugged his shoulders in sort of a que sera kind of a way. And then he turned to me and said, will you make me a fried egg sandwich for lunch? People with dementia do maddening things. They do things that will drive you up a wall. But caretakers are not supposed to get angry. We're not supposed to get upset or impatient or want to throttle our husbands. And so managing that kind of feeling of, are you kidding me? That is the most difficult challenge for me right now, and not one that I'm always very successful at. Beth maybe can give me some pointers, but it's a constant reminder that this person cannot help who he is. He cannot help what he is doing. And it's difficult to remind yourself that, and when you see your husband seem sort of normal sometimes and then do something so crazy, it's just a constant roller coaster. The third challenge is our biggest and most dangerous, and it's something that I had never heard of. Remember earlier in the talk, I talked about the perils of leaving early dementias undiagnosed or denied. This is one of those. It's not one that I wrote about and left. There are many. But the reason it's important to have a diagnosis is because when a doctor knows there is a suspicion of dementia or cognitive disease, it will inform every decision they make from then on. They will look for things that they wouldn't look for otherwise. And you cannot count on the patient to be the one to tell his doctor, "I think I'm losing my marbles," because they won't say that. So it's very important that that loved ones, family members really get in there and make sure a diagnosis is done. And in the case with my husband, his diagnosis led to the discovery of central sleep apnea. Not to be confused with obstructive sleep apnea, which is the one that most people know about when you have some physical thing that will crimp your airway and keep you from breathing during the night. With Bob, his brain is not sending the proper cues to his body to breathe. So he has several periods of time when he doesn't breathe during the night. It happens when you're unconscious. In the daytime, he's okay. In the best case scenario, your cognition suffers. You lose cognition faster when you have periods of time when your brain is not getting oxygen. Worst case scenario is you die in your sleep. Now, the cure or the treatment for this is a Cpap. Anybody know what a Cpap is? I have yet to meet anybody who likes their Cpap, and Bob hates his Cpap. It's this contraption you put over your face, and it's got a long hose, and there's oxygen, and it makes noise, and there are hard ones, soft ones, little, big, but he's tried them all, and he hates them all. And it's a struggle. It's getting him to wear his Cpap every night is like getting a kid to wear mittens in the snow. He walks out of the house in the mittens, and then he comes back, and they're gone. Bob goes to bed with his Cpap on, and he wakes up and it's off because I don't know what he does. But to me, it's I know that this is a dangerous situation, and it's very uncontrollable because I can't just watch him every minute of the night and make sure he's sleeping with this thing on. But nonetheless, it's a case of just trying to make the best of it. And I will say, I'm a writer. I love happy endings. It's very hard to feel like you have a happily ever after when you're dealing with this kind of a situation. But the one thing that has really helped me moving forward is to focus on all of the things that Bob still can do, instead of mourning all of the ways that he's leaving me little by little, which is why I called the novel Left. Because when you're living in a situation like this, that's exactly what's happening. Your loved one is leaving you bit by bit before your eyes. So I try to stay as positive as I can by celebrating everything that he can do. And because I nagged and whined and cried and threatened divorce, he got an early diagnosis, and it has helped. I'm sure Beth will talk about this in a minute, but I'm giving you a list here. But the only chance we all have at the moment of making any difference with Alzheimer's or dementia is catching it early. And the drugs, some drugs work, some don't, but if they do work, they're going to work to delay the symptoms only. So it's very important to get yourself diagnosed as soon as you can, or get a loved one diagnosed. So I don't want to end on a sour note, so I'm going to pass it over to our fabulous Beth Paris.
Not too much
I know.
pressure.
It's going to make everybody feel great. Thank you so much. And after Beth talks, she's going to expand the conversation to some questions that you might have about things that I can't answer. And then we'll open it up. You can ask me or Beth anything you want to say. So anything you want to ask. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I would say that Mary is an expert, as all caregivers become experts over time, because there's no way of going through this journey without educating yourself. And one of the best things Mary did was find a good support group, and she didn't give up after she went to that terrible lecture where somebody ripped the bandage off and really kind of went to the heart of things. But I'm here to say that usually through a support group, it doesn't have to be that way. Somebody can walk you through it and help you come out the way that Mary's come out, which is to be able to savor what the person still can do. This book is all marked up like this for several reasons. One is if you don't ask any questions, I have information that I can just pinpoint out of the book, but I think that you will have questions. The other is because I do run caregiver support group once a month at the Darien Senior Center, and it's really important that I have a library of not only factual information that is done by social workers and doctors and physician's assistants and researchers, but also really very poignant personal experiences. Because what makes the support group educational and comforting and helping people through the journey is the stories that people share with one another. So it's imperative that somebody actually partner with a group or many people, or go to many support groups, or find somebody that they can vent with that will help get them in a centered place the way that Mary is, because she's very centered. I highly recommend, if you haven't read the book yet, you can see by all the markings in it, that you read it, because it's a true love story. We were talking upstairs that many love stories end with happy endings, or many love stories have saccharine sweet moments. This actually does have some very lovely moments in it, and some beautiful quotes too. But it is realistic in the fact that you're going through a journey with an illness, that you're losing someone as they're right in front of you. And I'd like to make a mention of like dementia, because people get confused about dementia. There are other types of diseases, that Parkinsonian dementia, multi-infarct dementia, Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease. There's reversible dementias related to urinary tract infections, depression, So it's really important that you get to a doctor and that you find a doctor that's actually going to listen to you. The depiction of the doctor in this book, I don't know if that was really the first doctor you went to, more than an ass, I'll second that. Because if you go, this was a wife going, really pleading about her husband's symptoms. And the symptoms of a cognitive impairment, we often think are memory loss first. Memory loss comes a lot later. Personality changes are first. Executive functioning means processing information, sequencing information, being able to make connections to things in a very cognizant way. It's so much more than memory. The memory stuff comes later and is very frustrating. The repetitive behaviors, very frustrating. But the first signs are often behavioral, often out of the ordinary things that will happen that you say, this isn't my person, or this isn't the person I know. They wouldn't be behaving this way. Mood swings are another big component that you might see too before you see the memory impairment. And here's the other thing. People look at these things as mental health issues, and there are mental health issues that correspond with it, but the brain is the organizer of everything that happens inside of us. So the disease and what's happening in the brain is physical. Everything that's occurring is physical. So it's not like we can come up with one technique, one way of dealing with this that's going to let us be able to manage it. Because what's happening here in the computer, because this is a computer, you know, our computers that are out there, they're archetypes of what our organic matter is. We have a central nervous system that has a spinal cord that leads to every kind of ability that we have. Well, globally, if somebody has what is called classic Alzheimer's type dementia, which comes between 40 and 60 years old, which usually has a genetic component, that person generally lives about 20 to 25 years, and then this just cuts off. It doesn't tell your heart to beat anymore, doesn't tell your lungs to breathe, doesn't tell you to function. Very rare that it is classically Alzheimer's disease. That's the other reason it's very important to get a diagnosis, because vascular dementia has a lot of interventions that can happen that are psychosocial interventions, keeping that person, like for instance, the example of walking, keeping somebody socially engaged, making the mind work on puzzles that it's able to work on, good nutrition. All of those things will affect the vascular dementia and kind of stave it off. I would say that Mary's love and her devotion has probably kept her husband from going down on a slide and has actually helped him to level off, and still, of course, it's not going to stop completely, but drop the disease down in steps instead of a sled. So that is the control you have. And one of the really important things is to learn, and I actually teach this in my support groups, is validation techniques. And that is pretty much what Mary just said, meeting the person where they are, changing your expectations, being able to look at, behaviors and ways of being that give you other clues. You become a detective somewhat as well. She asked me, why have I worked I worked for 35 years with people with dementia. How could you do that, she said, and not get frustrated? The difference is my expectation level of everybody that I've met and I've been blessed to work with was exactly who they were the moment they came to me, okay? I didn't have an expectation of them being a doctor or being a linguist or being a wonderful mother, or I had met them where they were. And very often when I would do my first interview with the family and with the person, I used to run a social model adult day program. To enter the adult day program, I knew success was when the interview was all over, somebody would come to me, give me a hug and a kiss. Because they knew at last someone is accepting me exactly the way I am. And Mary's done that for her husband. And if you're on that journey, that's the key to it, is in that moment. It's not that you can't. She has a beautiful moment in the book when she gets frustrated, and it's exactly, I don't know if you learned this in caregiver support group, but it's exactly what I tell people all the time. get mad, go into your bathroom, shut the door, talk to yourself, say, I deserve to be angry, this really sucks, and I'm angry, and cry. And do whatever you need to do. You'll break into laughter at the end of it because you're talking to yourself. You'll go back out into the room where your loved one is, and they'll look at you like, oh, hi, nice, good to see you back in the room again.
Can you make me a sandwich?
Exactly. Could I have a fried egg sandwich? And you'll be able to release some steam that way. And you'll be surprised how often that would help just by giving you permission to be able to do those things. So if anybody has a specific question they'd like to ask, I'm available to take a specific question. Okay, very simply. What the question was is really separate the difference out between what dementia is, Dementia 101, and Alzheimer's disease. Dementia is a set of symptoms that affect the executive functioning of the brain, behavior, sequencing, understanding, being able to comprehend, and memory. There are many diseases that you can have dementia in, including psychological diseases. Many schizophrenics have wonderful periods of dementia. So the difference is the reason why it's the lead. Matter of fact, the new technology, since I started many moons ago, it used to be called senile dementia, organic brain syndrome. Then it was Alzheimer's type dementia. Now it is dementia of the Alzheimer's type. Under that falls multi-infarct or vascular dementia. Multi-infarct meaning that you have little strokes. Vascular dementia could be you have arterial or arteriosclerosis, so you're not getting good circulation anymore. Creutzfeldt-Jacobs disease, which is really related to folks that have had a long history of drinking. There's a dementia related to that. Also, the other one that's escaping me right now, well, Lewy body's disease too, and which is because of the way the neurofibular tangles are in a certain area of the brain, it puts pressure on the whole global brain, and you have different symptoms with that, and also frontal lobe dementia as well. So what does that mean? They do all look different in the way that they progress. They are not different in the end, but they are different as they progress. So there's certain possibilities of caregiving that are a little bit more manageable, like I would say with a vascular dementia, than there might be with somebody that has Lewy body's disease. Because Lewy body's disease, in that one, there's often violence. There's also hitting back and stuff. So you want to get, and this is what we didn't have years ago, we didn't have CAT scans and MRIs and PET scans that could really look at the brain. So though it's still not conclusive until autopsy, because we can take these pictures that we never had before, and they're getting better and better and more sophisticated at being able to diagnose, they're using that, which is going to help the caregiver in the long run know specifically what they're dealing with. Also, in relation to medications, there might be like anti-anxiety drugs or mood modifiers that they'll give that they wouldn't have given had it been classically Alzheimer's. You're welcome. The question is, will it speed the disease up if the caregiver is impatient or angry?
God, I hope not.
No. The answer to that is the poor caregiver will probably come down with something if they continue to be like that. So I would be more concerned about the stress of the caregiver, because what does happen as people progress through the illness, they have no worries. As we may say that we think, oh my goodness, a poor soul, they don't, what they're going through. There is a stage when you get to, and there are Reisberger stages. If you come to my support group, I'll explain all this to you. It's too long to do here. But you get to a certain level where their stress, which is almost a blessing for the caregiver, is almost non-existent. Your stress is the stress you have to deal with, and then from that standpoint, you need the comfort at that point. Well, prolonged stress is not good for any of us, and actually, if somebody is of a certain age and they're caregiving and they're under prolonged stress and they're depressed, they may actually be susceptible to acquiring a dementia themselves, but it may be reversible if they get the care that they need. So, yeah, we don't want that to happen.
I would like to add that you're going to be mad. When you're taking care
For
of
sure.
somebody, you're going to be mad, you're going to be impatient, you're going to be, lash out, all those things happen. And I wonder if your brother is not, maybe because he's a guy, he's not as likely to join a support group, but groups really help because everybody talks about their anger and their frustration. And I think it's a matter of managing it and trying to make up for it. It's a daily struggle, definitely.
And in terms of men, I have men that come to talk to me because they won't be in the group, but they come to vent. Once in a while, I see them in the lobby. Hello, okay, I got 15 minutes, let's go. So if they don't want to join the group, though, they're wonderful when they're in groups. So I still keep trying to troll to get them in because it is better for them to hear a live experience of other people as well. But being frustrated. Now, the other thing is that even in Mary's book, you don't want me to tell the whole story, but even in her book, she ends up getting a wonderful caregiver. Did you, Mary? Really? But it's in the book. That helps take care. And they have a wonderful synergy with her husband and her. And that can happen. And
It's not easy to do. I will say that
You have the
Bob
fire.
can stay alone, like he's by himself now. But when I'm gone for a week, I need somebody to come in. And he will say, I don't need a caretaker. What am I going to do with this person? I don't want, he doesn't want a care. Nobody wants a caretaker. So what I did was, through my support group, I found this guy who used to be a chef in Brooklyn. He had his own restaurant. And his restaurant went under, and then because he's a smart guy, he decided to go into the business of the future and become a caretaker. So I said, Bob, good news. I hired a chef to come in while I'm gone. So that changed everything. And then he became like, wow, well, what do I like? And he worked on the menu. And so I think there's like, we call it therapeutic lying in group, where there are just ways that you can not make matters worse, but still bring somebody in who's going to take care. Reframe.
Yeah.
There you go.
reframe, yes. Yeah. And I prefer reframing too, and also being creative. Just be creative. You don't, as long as you get, right, we had somebody who needed to have somebody come in, and we told them that they won a raffle at church, and they got 5 free weeks of house cleaners. And then after they fell in
that's
love with
great.
the lady, there she was, and she was there to be a companion. I like to do the creative stuff more. It's more fun. I also wanted to address something that you said, because this was about a brother. It's very different. This is all about a spouse, pretty much. The son, oh my gosh, the example of the son is so classic. But when it's a son or a daughter caregiving a mother or a father, it's almost imperative that you tell them the truth if it's getting to be too much for you. And you will almost always turn that person around. For instance, if they're really getting on your nerves, to say, Mom, be my mother for a minute or I'm going to lose my mind. I need your love right now. And even I've seen people, even without words, that are not able to really articulate, just calm completely down when you give them back the role of being mom or give them back the role of being dad. So to have some expectation is really important. Spouses can do it too, but because spouses kind of are in a banter of stabilization in the relationship all the time. The mother-child relationship, the father-child relationship can really take you telling them the truth and asking for them to return to that role, which they'll love.
And it's difficult when your spouse is in a memory home too. It's,
Right.
That's a whole other thing of guilt, and I hear you.
It's another important point that you're making, is that the care plan changes as the needs change. And the most important thing for the caregiver is to feel good about, I've done this, I've reached the point now that I need to do this and to follow this. Another thing that support groups really help a lot with, and to Mary's point, you're still the person that's championing for him. You're still the one that loves him. You're still the one that's watching out. If you need a symphony to take care of him instead of just one person, two person, three, it's fine. It's just what that journey is going to be for you. There are pamphlets here that I brought from the Alzheimer's Association, so that there's information that you can get on that as well. And our local person for this area is Shannon Jordan, who does most of the educational programs around and will help you with that if you wanted to do a match or a trial. They're trying to make that part of a regular, they're asking about testing when you don't know you have it. They're trying to make that regular part of medical school criterion that when you reach a certain age, everybody is tested for mild cognitive impairment so that they have a baseline. So you're going to see more doctors actually doing that now. So you'll go in for a physical and you won't even know that part of it is a neurological baseline that they're doing. You might ask them, why are you asking me to touch my toes? Why are you asking me to answer all these questions? Why are you asking me to remember 5 objects and then tell you 10 minutes later what they are? It's because it's going to become a baseline. Because if they have a baseline, that's going to help with early detection a lot faster too. And they're very simple questions and tests that they do.